We all like to make money and we all like to buy things. Well, how does our system buy and sell things? When we go to the supermarket to buy food, when we go to the mall or to Walmart to get that new movie or to buy a shirt or to pick out the bottle of cold medicine that will give us hopefully that little bit of relief. How does that bottle of cold medicine or that shirt get there to the store? And who decides what shirts get into the store or what kind of medicines are able to get to into the market? And why do we have so many different kinds of cold medicines and different kinds of shirts to choose from? Who gets to make those decisions? Why do we have 10 different kinds of cold medicines to choose from, but only 3 or 4 different kinds of coffee makers to choose from? Well, that all comes down to our economic systems. And there are traditionally 4 different kinds of economic systems when we get down to the nitty gritty of how money moves and flows within a country or a government system. And so we're going to talk today about the 4 different kinds of money systems that flow throughout a region. And some of this should be a little bit of a review. So here we go. The first type of economic system is the traditional system. It's the oldest and simplest form of economic system, and it's been used since the tribal days when people were gathered together in family units, and it relied heavily on habit and custom or even ritual when work was heavily divided among gender lines. This type of system was slow to adapt to new ideas and technology, and it really did lack modern conveniences and had a very low standard of living. And this is not really practiced in much of the world today. We would consider this like third world living. The parts of the world that do practice this today are not considered very advanced. And this kind of economic system is very much fading out. So it really kind of falls on a spectrum of just how much of a command economy and how much of a market economy of so when we talk about a spectrum, it we talk about to what varying degrees of that economy it is. So when we're determining what kind of economic system a country has, we have to ask ourselves 3 questions. What kind of goods and services does that economic system produce? How are the goods produced? And for whom are the economic goods and services produced? Those 3 questions will determine what kind of economic system a country has. When you answer those questions, then you'll be able to say, hey, that's the kind of economy that country has. So let's talk a little bit more about a market economy. The first question in a market economy: what kind of goods are typically produced in a market economy? Well, in a market economy, the consumers decide what kind of goods are produced in a market economy. So that means private businesses form to meet the consumer's wants and needs. If consumers, that means people buying the goods, decide, hey, we really like shoes, there's going to be a lot of private businesses that step up to produce shoes. If they say, hey, the trend of the day is actually pants, a lot of companies are going to step up to do pants. If they say, hey, we're not into clothes, we're actually more into electronics, a lot of companies are going to step up and do more electronics. So it's really the people with the buying power, the consumer, that dictate what kind of businesses are going to step up and produce the goods. So, in other words, if the consumer doesn't want it, it's not going to be produced. Have you ever thought, hey, why isn't that made anymore? Well, it means people weren't buying it. It's not going to be produced if people aren't buying it. The second question in a market economy is, how are the goods going to be produced? So if I want to sell something, I need to ask myself, how am I going to make that product? In this case, the businesses decide how the goods are going to be produced. They must compete with other companies and products for the what we call the raw materials for those goods and services to be produced. The individual companies must find the most efficient and cost effective ways to produce those goods in order for them to succeed. And then they have to ask themselves, for whom are those goods going to be produced? Well, the general answer to that one is for those who have the money. In other words, for who can afford it. If you don't have the money to afford those goods, too bad. Nobody is entitled to buy anything. Anybody who has the money and is motivated to work to get the money for the goods and services should have the right to buy those goods and services. That's what a market economy is all about. Those who work hard and make the money get the goods. That's the foundation of a market economy. Well, then there's the command economy. Let's take those same three questions and ask ourselves, how does a command economy work? In a command economy, what goods are produced? Well, in a command economy, it's the government who decides what goods are produced. The government chooses what is important to spend their resources on. In other words, what are we going to put our money into? For example, the government could decide to spend their money on either military resources or furniture. Thus, shortages could exist for goods that aren't deemed important by the government. If the government decides that the military needs to be beefed up, you could go without a bed to sleep on. The second question of how goods could be produced, who do you think is going to decide that? If the government's allocating the resources of what, the government's going to say how. The government owns the means of production as well as the what of production. They employ the workers, so they control the industry. They set the wages and they determine the schedules. There's no bargaining and there's no competition. Therefore, you're not going to get the best price because there's only one price. So, our third question of for whom should the goods be produced? The government is the one who's going to decide who gets what and how much. Everybody is treated equally. Well, at least in theory. Everyone gets their basic needs met, at least in theory. The government provides the housing, they dictate where you live, the government provides the food, they decide what you eat, and the government provides the jobs. They determine where you work, at least in theory. So let's review our two economic systems. Remember, in in general, most economic systems fall into two broad categories: the market economy and the command economy. No one country has a pure market or a pure command economy. It falls on a spectrum. In other words, most economic systems are mixed. So you have to think of to what degree. So there's three models or philosophies of economies: the capitalist model, the socialist model, and the communist model. These are all called mixed economic systems. These all fall on the spectrum of mixed economic systems. We're going to look at each of these mixed economic systems in depth. The capitalist system is the same as free enterprise. It can be characterized as self interest and competition. Self interest is the motivating force in the free market. The government doesn't provide for the people, but it allows them to purchase and own what they want, and individuals are motivated to work and earn money for purchases. In other words, if you want it, you work for it. In a free market system, the businesses struggle to gain dollars from consumers. Those with the best business plan get the dollars. Since the businesses compete for profit, the free market is regulated through the company's incentive for lower prices to provide better products. In other words, you want to make goods for the lowest cost and sell it for the biggest buck in order to make the most money. The socialist kind of government falls somewhere in the middle of the market ideology. The government reduces the difference between the rich and the poor. It's almost like a classless system. There is no them and us. Key industries are run by the government. They control the prices and they provide the guidance to all of the key government systems so that no one has an unfair advantage. They provide services from the time that you are born to the time that you die, sometimes called the cradle to the grave. High taxes are needed to provide those services. So if you're making a lot of money, you're going to pay a lot of taxes. In this model, people tend to believe that there should be only one class. Everybody should be equal. And that, which also means that everyone should have health care, schooling, and pensions. Again, that cradle to grave philosophy that everyone is cared for at all times. But in order to do this, it has to be a fair distribution of wealth, no matter how hard you work. Businesses and almost all industry would be highly regulated. So, in other words, it doesn't matter how hard you work, everyone would be treated equally. The communist government takes that philosophy to the extreme. They're on the other far end of the spectrum from the market economy. The government runs everything. All people are assigned jobs and their schooling. Housing is assigned according to need. Medical care is free, but the government determines all medical care and what products and goods are sold in the marketplace. However, this economic system provides no incentive to work because all of the extra money is controlled and taken by the government. The government dictates how you're going to make and where you work. Therefore, it does not even stipulate it even stipulates that you are provided for if you do not work. This kind of system has been proven to fail because there is no competition to innovate or improve in technology and efficiencies. Privatization happens, which means allowing businesses to be privately owned and not government owned. So, to review, most economic systems in the world are mixed, but there are some economic systems in the world that fall on different places of this spectrum. For example, North Korea is highly communist. And as you're going to see, as the continuum fills in, there are other countries in the world who fall in different places on the continuum from command to market, as far as their economies are concerned. Watch watch where the United States falls. I think you're going to be very surprised.